Welcome to Conference Highlights, recorded in front of a live audience at an evidence-based perioperative medicine, that's EBPOM conference. EBPOM are world leaders in perioperative education, so why not join us at our next meeting with a special discount for Top Med Talk subscribers. Look us up on www.ebpom, that's EBPOM.com. Top Med Talk.
Well, it is truly my pleasure. Not only have we been so thankful for all of the events up until now, and we've been mentioning Dr. Mike Ramsay's name frequently for being our host, but we also are double privileged because he's giving us the keynote address to end today's sessions. A few words on Dr. Mike Ramsay. Chief of the Service and Department of Anesthesiology and Pain Medicine here at Baylor University Medical Center. President of the Baylor Scott and White Research Institute. He serves as a member of the Baylor University Medical Center Board of Trustees and is past president of the International Liver Transplantation Society. In addition, Dr. Ramsay, so many of us already know him for his very infamous Ramsay sedation scale, and he obviously was the developer of that very, very iconic and important tool. That we've used to measure and interpret depth of sedation in patients throughout their critical care unit stays. It's really been a very important tool that's been adopted around the world. He also is a member of the board of the Patient Safety Movement Foundation since its inception. Dr. Ramsay has been an active participant in the annual Patient Safety Summits. He's received many awards, among them an award for his work on preventing opioid-induced respiratory depression, and has spoken ardently about patient safety both nationally and internationally. He's committed to making our hospitals safe, and he has been really paramount in an event to prevent deaths to zero worldwide. He's giving me the hook. I could go on and on. Many publications, hundreds, and I wouldn't do justice to just cut short, but I'm going to because he's too humble. Thank you.
Thank you. I think I'm all right. So, Sol, thank you. Monty, thank you. Desiree and your whole team, thank you very much for coming here and bringing this phenomenal meeting. It's really been a great education for me, and I think for the attendees, we're very honored you'd be here. And my topic is patient safety, because I think that's what enhanced recovery is all about. It is keeping our patients safe, keeping them well. I've just gone through a personal experience. My wife had a total hip replaced 2 days ago. She got out of the hospital within 24 hours, no opioids, no PONV, and she's walking. So I'm very thankful to that too, because it's enhanced recovery. So to talk about this, I do have a disclosure. I get research grants from Massimo Corporation. So the vision is zero, and that's of the Patient Safety Movement Foundation.
Healthy people are dying in hospitals. Every year globally, more than 4.8 million people die from preventable causes. Preventable deaths in hospitals are the third leading cause of death in the U.S., behind heart disease and cancer. And this problem isn't just measured in human lives. The social cost of in-hospital adverse events is estimated to be between 18 and 45 cents of every dollar spent on U.S. healthcare. That means of the $3.5 trillion spent on healthcare in 2017, medical errors account for $1.44 trillion. This all may feel unsettling, but there is hope. We are the Patient Safety Movement, and we've made a commitment to drop the number of patient deaths by preventable causes to zero by 2020 by unifying the healthcare ecosystem and implementing a commitment-based movement, actionable patient safety solutions, and an ecosystem for predictive algorithms through data sharing. We can, together, eliminate preventable deaths and dramatically reduce the cost of healthcare worldwide. Last year, we reported 81,533 lives saved by committed hospitals, and this year, we're excited to report that 90,146 lives have been saved by hospitals that have taken action. And with your help, we can get to zero. But we must act quickly. as we're going to need everyone to lead us to zero. We're going to need policymakers to create incentives for change, healthcare technology companies to sign the Open Data Pledge, and healthcare providers to implement proven processes such as APSS to save lives, so that patients survive and families don't have to mourn their loved ones. Your commitment could make all the difference for her family, his family, their family, and your family. This is more than a mission. It's a commitment-based movement. Commit today so people can live tomorrow.
And so this is really my role now, is to try and persuade you all to join the Patient Safety Movement Foundation. It's just a commitment, no money, just get involved and come up with the best solutions to prevent all these preventable deaths. And I really think now we're making an impression, and I'll show you some data as we go forward. At Baylor, Scott and White, they've gone even further. They've gone for zero harm. So when you think for every death, and we know there's somewhere between 200, 400,000 deaths that are preventable a year, there must be 1,000 patients that get harmed. So this is a very, very tough goal to go for, but the hospital and healthcare system are committed to it. So the vision is to get to zero by 2020. That's next year. We're still a way off. So we'll have to think of another slogan to put onto it, because I don't think we're going to get to zero by 2020. But we have made an impact, and I think we've got to build on it. We've got to do better, but we've got to make our hospitals safe places to go to. And these are the facts, and we heard them on that video, that there's a tremendous amount of money cost because of preventable errors. And what is an error? It's an inaccurate diagnosis. Hospital-acquired infections, they can be prevented. Medication, wrong dose, wrong medication, wrong patient. Poor handoff communication. Poor communication is a very common cause of medical error. And does it happen? Yes, it does. This was in the newspapers just recently at Vanderbilt. Very prestigious, top medical center, and yet a nurse gave the muscle relaxant vecuronium instead of Versed. The patient was anxious. They wanted a little Versed to relax them. They end up getting paralyzed and pushed into a CT scanner. Can you imagine what a horrific death that was? Total error. She overrode the Omnicell machine or the Pyxis machine to get the drug out. Just put the first two letters in, VE for Versed, VE for vecuronium. That should be impossible. Houston replaces leadership after blood transfusion mistake. They labeled the blood incorrectly and killed a patient. But at least one of the things they did, and it's our ex-president who's there now, they were transparent about it. They were very open about it. And I think that's part of overcoming medical errors, is to admit them, talk about them to the patient, don't hide them, don't cover them up. And so, sorry, we went backwards there. So some of the problems we cause or we don't prevent: respiratory depression, sepsis, cardiac arrest, hemorrhage. And when you go into a hospital, and this was my concern 2 days ago, this is a cartoon from a Canadian intensivist, Ward Pierce Flemons. And that is, the patient comes in and something bad happens. Unfortunately, we're on top of it, we correct it, and the patient does well. They get to the safe place. The safe place is home, not the hospital. The safe place is home. Get out of the hospital, because occasionally we fail to rescue. We commit an error and we fail to rescue. So failure to rescue, I think, is a surgical quality indicator. We ought to be able to anticipate the problems, identify the problems that occur with patients, and intervene so we do rescue them. No patient should die because of a failure to rescue. a death of a patient after one or more treatable complications, that's what failure to rescue is. It shouldn't happen. We need prompt recognition, and treatment is critical. And so I think we've seen a little bit today in some of the talks, the role of continuous monitoring and predictive or artificial intelligence, predictive intelligence. And maybe we're at the point now, most of you have got a monitor on you. You've got a watch or you've got a phone that'll monitor your footsteps, your calories, detect AFib. All these things are now possible. Why don't our patients have them? Why shouldn't they have some small monitor that monitors basic vital signs that can transmit with a Wi-Fi signal to the caregiver to their smartphone and say, go to see patient in room 33, there's a problem. That technology exists. We need to push for it. We need to get it out there to our patients. So these are the strategic goals of the patient safety movement and why I got involved, because it's got a different approach to the problem. There are multiple patient safety organizations, but this one seemed to pull everybody into the puzzle of how we're going to fix this. It had healthcare technology companies, had patients, patient families, healthcare providers, healthcare systems, politicians, even entertainers. And you've got a commitment-based approach. In other words, it's a fresh approach to old problems. We don't want to reinvent the wheel. We want a solution to stop these occurring. We've just seen what's happened with the Boeing 737 MAX that's gone down. I mean, that rarely happens. It's happened this time, but it took 2 planes, it stopped. And they're going to fix that problem, or they'll be fixed. And I think the difference is obviously the pilot goes down with the plane. And with medicine, that's not necessarily the case. But we've got to treat it exactly the same. Every preventable death should be looked at as a plane crash. So this is the people who make up the patient safety movement. And this is the commitment to implement apps. Basically, we try and create the safest practice that's been proven by different hospitals, different healthcare systems, where they can demonstrate they've reduced ventilator-acquired pneumonia, they've reduced or made to zero CLABSI, and show us how. And then we'll put it on an app and we'll publicize it so that other people can copy it and not have to reinvent the wheel. And we involve everybody. Everybody in the system gets involved. And these are some of the committed hospitals and healthcare systems. Some of the partners: European Society of Anesthesia, Australian New Zealand Society, AARC, ASA, Anesthesia Patient Safety Foundation. So a lot of companies, people, organizations, healthcare systems have got involved. The European Society joined last year. Australian New Zealand Society joined last year as well. And I got the opportunity to go over there and meet with their president. And healthcare technology companies, well, how can they commit? They can commit by sharing data. Not sharing IP, but sharing data, so that we can use the data from different monitors onto a single monitor, so that it all interacts, communicates, so that we can develop early warning systems that something's going to happen. As we heard at lunchtime today, using artificial intelligence, you can tell when somebody's blood pressure is going to drop. Well, let's put all that information together and present to us, the caregivers, warnings that somebody's going to get into trouble. And these are some of the technology companies that are involved. Some are here today. Thank you. And patient family advocates, because these are all patients, loved ones who died, or patients' family members who've all got a really heart-rending story to tell you, but that brings it home to you that this is real. This isn't something that happens to somebody else. It happens to us. And just an example, Pete Conrad was an astronaut. He got to the moon and back. He got the technology to get to the moon and back safely. He came off his motorbike in Arizona and got taken to hospital, and they missed a ruptured spleen. He died of a slow hemorrhage from a ruptured spleen. Imagine that. Get to the moon and back. We've got the technology. We can't pick up bleeding and blood loss. This is Leonore Alexander. She was that concerned about the hospital. Her daughter had a pectus carinatum repaired, very painful procedure on your chest, and she had a thoracic epidural that had dilaudid in it. She slept in the room with her daughter, and yet her daughter died, and she didn't detect the fact that her daughter's breathing had slowed down. She thought it was just natural sleep. The nurse came and checked on her 10 minutes before she died, thought it was natural sleep. It wasn't. We have technology now. We could put on patients on opioids to pick that up, because the human eye can't pick it up 100% of the time. So she tells a real heart-rending story about that. So we need policymakers too to help us, encourage us, fund us for the best practices, maybe hurt us for the bad practices if you don't move into line to take the best care of our patients. And that's happening. And these are some of the policymakers. There's Sir Liam Donaldson, who is the Chief Medical Officer for England. He's very supportive. Jeremy Hunt was the British Medical Health Minister. He's been very supportive indeed. He's now their Secretary of State, so he's moved on a little bit, although he did come back to Dubai a few months ago as Dubai and the Gulf states joined the patient safety movement. And he's been a big advocate, particularly about opening up honest mistakes, not punishing people for honest mistakes, but advertising them, talking about them so somebody else doesn't make the same mistake. If you cut corners, there's absolutely going to be accountability, though. The head of the World Health Organization, very much involved. And, of course, politicians. And they're actually, when they get involved, and we have them from both sides of the House in the United States, they've been very powerful advocates of patient safety. And they're politicians, as you can see. So every hospital leadership, every healthcare leadership have got to get involved, because it comes from the top down. We have to push them to create these high reliability organizations. The culture of safety has got to be right across your system. And I must say, I'm pleased to say that when my wife came through 2 days ago, I was very impressed by the safety measures that everybody was taking. But to err is still human, and if you're in a third world country, it's still safer to stay at home than come into your hospital. The mortality, if you get sick going into the hospital, is higher than if you stayed at home. That's unbelievable. The Candor program came out of University of Illinois and now is at MedStar. And basically, they're very open about any mistakes they make. They will tell a patient within 30 minutes or family, we think we made a mistake. There's no charge from care from that point on. There's a credit card given actually to the family to pick up expenses from that point on. And they do a root cause analysis. They look at it. If it wasn't a mistake, then they come back and explain what it was. If it was a mistake, they continue with that action. And they do sit down with the attorneys as well. And they work out a very quick settlement. And that's reduced serious patient safety events by 65% since 2012. It's reduced the cost of care associated with serious safety events, but more so, it's saved $70 million in lawsuits. It's not that some patients aren't angry, but the plaintiff attorneys would rather waiting for 5 years for some kind of judgment. They'd rather get funded within 6 months, and the hospital will pay them. And so it's a win-win for everybody. And it advertises what happened so that everybody in that healthcare system learns from that mistake. It's not hidden at all. Rather like Houston there, where they advertised, they showed, they were transparent about what happened. So we want hospitals and healthcare organizations to make a commitment and measure and show the results. And so we create these actionable patient safety solutions, which you can all log on to. It's www.Patient Safety Foundation, Movement Foundation on the website.org. And you can look at them all, just click on and see what they are. If you've got something better you think is safer and you can prove it, we'll add it. Or we'll change it to make it the app. But we've got to have solid data that actually has prevented a problem in your hospital. And so far, with independent auditors, it looks like we're somewhere around 90,000 lives saved. Hospitals involved, 4,700. Technology companies involved, 90 or 89. And if we look at an independent group, the AHRQ, they'll show some of the improvements that come across the US hospital systems. Not everything's improved. Surgical site infections are still there. They haven't moved, and pressure ulcers have increased. But just about everything else has come down. From CLABSIs, CAUDI, adverse drug events, obstetric adverse events, falls, all these things have improved. This was just published a month ago. And so it's very current data. So we're making an improvement in this country, and we've got the opportunity to make an improvement right across the globe. Nosocomial infections, it's a strange word. What does it mean? It means an infection you didn't come in the hospital with. It's an infection you got in the hospital. That should be totally avoidable. That means somebody didn't wash their hands. Somebody didn't scrub the hub of the IV before they injected a medication. And that gives you central line infections. Ours is not zero here. We've been zero for the last 9 weeks. We know each one we get, but we've had 7 this year. And they've all been related to dialysis catheters. And so we're really looking at each one like a plane crash to see how we can prevent it. This is Memorial Hermann Hospital. They got their rate down to 0. And at the same time, not only did their central line rate go down to 0, but so did their ventilator-associated pneumonias. What was the key factor in all that? It was washing hands. And they audited it. They made sure from secret shoppers watching, everybody washed their hands before they touched the patient. This is our hospital, and this is what we got involved in a number of years back. We noticed on our trauma orthopedic floor, we had 40 rapid response team calls in 1 month. And of those, 38 were given Narcan. Most of them were returned down to the ICU for another 24, 48 hours. They were all opioid-induced respiratory depressions. So we put together a team to look at how could we prevent that. We called it the Breathe team for obvious reasons. Breathing is good. And we put everybody on it and looked to see what the problem was. And it was interesting. It was a respiratory therapist who said, why is it that every one of these patients is on oxygen on the floor? And we'd never really thought about it. Well, why are they on oxygen? Well, it turned out when we dug into it, to get out of our recovery room, you have to have an O2 set of 94%. These patients were not making it. Why were they not making it? Because they had too much opioid on board. They weren't breathing. So we treated respiratory depression with oxygen. And these patients were coding within 30 minutes of hitting the floor. So we put in something we call the oxygen withdrawal trial, which I'll mention in a minute. So we looked to see who was high risk. We thought it was going to be the sleep apnea patients, obese patients. It turned out to be anybody. Anybody. And I think that's the genetic component of opioids, that anybody can be super sensitive. So we did these interventions. We had 50 pain medicine order sets for the different orthopedic surgeons, all escalating because nobody wanted to get called for pain management in the middle of the night. We converted it into one set of standard orders. We stopped continuous PCA on opioid-naive patients. And we screened patients that we thought were particularly at risk with the Blueberry wristband, and we put continual monitoring on the patients. We changed to ARIS protocols, basically multimodal therapy. We decided we'd do everything we could to get opioids taken out. Now, these are big bone fractures. They're tough cases to deal with, but we made a big difference. We cut them way down. These are some of the things we did, which we've heard here, all these different blocks and ketamine on the floor. We do that now, low dose. and the oxygen withdrawal trial. And really all the oxygen withdrawal trial is, if you want to send a patient back on oxygen from our recovery room, you've got to take oxygen off them and show us why. And they do that twice. If they fail twice, then a physician has to go and check on them and assess them to find out, why does this patient need oxygen? And that reduced these, because pulse oximeter is a late pickup of respiratory depression. If you're on oxygen, your CO2 can be up in the hundreds. And that took us down to 0. Although every now and again we get 1. But it's early and we intervene. We've not had a code or anything like that. But you can't let your guard down. And for those of you who understand blood gases, this is a living donor liver transplant that I took care of a few months ago, extubated in a recliner in the ICU. And I just wanted to go by 4 hours later to check on her to see how she was doing. And I looked at her in the recliner and she was slumped. And so I asked the nurse, is she doing okay? And the answer was, yes, the O2 sat's 98%. So I went over, she's unrousable, I bagged her a few times, got a blood gas, drew off the line, and this was the blood gas. The CO2 was 148. How close was she? And this is one-on-one, one nurse to one patient. So we can all have blind spots. So we have to have better monitoring. And, you know, there's some here today that we can look at, which all could help prevent that. I get, because I give this talk, and I've done it on television, a number of people will email me about problems they've had. This was a nurse from Ohio sent me this email about her husband who had a single-level laminectomy. Took an hour in surgery and an hour in recovery, went to the floor and was given a PCA pump. He died on the floor of an opioid-induced respiratory depression. If he'd gone home, he'd be alive today. But super kindness, and that's one of the other things that we have to impress is, look, what's the pain goal? All the nurses have to write down on their chart their goal for pain management. Is it 0, or is it 3, or is it 4? And we push very much that it should be 4. If you've had major surgery, maybe you can feel a little pain. Maybe that's not so bad. Maybe we have pain for a reason. You'll guard the site. Maybe it's not all bad. And to go for 0 potentially is bad. Because, you know, as we heard earlier, we tend to treat pain with opioids and we overdo it. This is a video about an ex-Navy SEAL.
John and I grew up in Michigan. We were married in Michigan. We were married in October 1979, and he passed away in March of 2007. In October of 2006, he went in for his first shoulder surgery. In January, we were at church for New Year's Eve for a gathering, and we were in the gym, and he saw some boys, they were playing basketball, and out of the corner of the eye, he caught a basketball coming our way. He put his arm out to block the ball, and he completely tore the rotator cuff. He was in a lot of pain. So in March, that's when we went back in for his second surgery. John was diagnosed with sleep apnea after he had been suffering severe migraines while he was still in the Navy. And the doctors never explained to us that sleep apnea wasn't just a sleep issue, that it could be deadly, that it was a respiratory issue. We didn't understand that. When he had his surgery, his second surgery, we did tell the doctors and the anesthesiologist and the nurses that he had sleep apnea. After his surgery, I was able to go up to his room and visit with him for a little while. He was a little sleepy and no pain. We talked a little bit, he rested a little bit, and then I left and told him I'd see him again in the evening. And when I got there, our friend was fanning him. I took him into the bathroom. He continued. Every time he would move his head, he would vomit. And the nurse brought him some anti-nausea medicine and said that she decided she was going to take him off the morphine pump and start him on Dilaudid. That that would be so much better. She could give him higher dosages more often, and he would feel real good. He never moved. He didn't make any sounds, didn't talk to me, no eye contact. Around 10 o'clock, he fell asleep. He started snoring. And so me not understanding the snoring and the sleep apnea, I thought, oh, he's finally gonna get a good night's rest. I was tired. I had a sick puppy. I thought, well, I'll go home. He's sleeping. I'll see him again first thing in the morning and bring him home. And I kissed him on the forehead and said, good night, I love you, I'll see you in the morning. And I went home. And I never heard his voice again. Their conclusion, the nurses and the physicians in the ICU, was that with the medication and his sleep apnea, he went into a deep sleep and his body wasn't able to wake up. He had not been monitored once they removed him from the morphine. So there was no way for anyone to know that he was in trouble. Because John was retired military, his case was reviewed by Chief of Anesthesiology at Bethesda, Maryland, the Naval Hospital. And his conclusion was the same as the ICU personnel at Mary Washington. This anesthesiologist went so far as to tell me, Mrs. LaChance, if you had taken your husband home the night of his surgery, he'd still be with you today. He wouldn't have had the problems that he would have had, and he'd still be with you. I got a call from the hospital saying that they were going to take John in to surgery to harvest his organs. And that's the last I ever heard from the hospital. It was just to tell me that they were going to harvest his organs. I wish I had known before his surgery what I've come to understand now. And what I would like to do is to be able to go back to that hospital and help them make a difference. I believe that we can make a change, each one of us individually that have suffered through this. And along with the patient safety movement, I think it can happen, but we have to make that first step for our loved ones.
So, no transparency, no interaction, no honesty, and nobody learned from that experience. Fortunately, what we're here today for is enhanced recovery. Hopefully that would never happen in an enhanced recovery program. We'd treat them very differently. We wouldn't just hit shoulder pain with an opioid. And so no patient in our hospital should be found dead in bed. It should be the safest place. We've got to make our hospitals safe places. You shouldn't have to go into a hospital worried, are you going to come out? And I think non-invasive monitoring, the time's now. We've got the technology. I think it can be very cheap to apply to every patient, some simple, straightforward monitor that would continuously monitor them while they're on drugs that could hurt them. And the Anesthesia Patient Safety Foundation recommends this for patients on opioids. And early warning systems so that we can rescue patients when they get into trouble will be alerted. And all these things exist right now. It's just a matter now of pushing our hospitals to purchase something, the people or the manufacturers to make something that is easy, simple, like these devices, and put them on our patients. Because all kinds of devices are now available. Non-invasive, can monitor all kinds of things, even cardiac output. And remote surveillance. Even if we send patients home after, like my wife came home after 24 hours from a total hip, she could be monitored at home. And the signals transferred back up to the hospital, to the caregivers. All that technology is here. So I think that's what we've got to push for. I think particularly those of you in anesthesia could really lead this, that we need to be monitoring patients and we need to create the right monitors so that we can make all the instruments talk together, all the different companies put their information on a screen so we can look and see patients deteriorate, and the monitors can tell us somebody's deteriorating and alert us. Because your car does it, you won't back into that wall, the car will alarm you. We've seen this today, but isn't that great, predictive? I think it is. I think that's the kind of technology we want, and we want it on a lot of different things, not just hypotension. We want it on hypoxia. We want it on early fever. We want it so we can get into sepsis faster. And we want all these algorithms looked at, and more people are looking at this latest one and saying how accurate it is. Well, that technology could apply to a lot of different things that would prevent us from finding a patient dead in bed. It would alert us so that we can intervene and do something in time. So I think we've got two prongs to this. One is we do better treatment, which we've talked about here for the last 2 days, of how we enhance the treatment and move away from opioids and drugs that will hurt you. And we monitor patients, because the hospital should be the safest place in the world when you're sick. You shouldn't have to worry that somebody's going to kill you. So with that, thank you all very much indeed, and I hope that you'll join the Patient Safety Movement Foundation. Give us some input.
Nick Majerison here. Thank you for listening to Top Med Talk. Now, make sure you've subscribed to Top Med Talk on your podcatcher or however it is that you're listening to us at the moment. And you're spoilt for choice. We're on pretty much every single podcast platform you could think of. So make sure you've subscribed. Make sure you've engaged with us on social media, Twitter, Facebook, LinkedIn, YouTube. And make sure you've signed up for our email updates on topmedtalk.com. If you get yourself there, you'll find a website that contains all of the podcasts that we've ever done, and it gives you the chance to sign up for our email updates. That way we can always get in touch with you and tell you what we're up to. Oh, and while you're online, check out ebpom.org/meetings. While you're there, get excited about EBPOM London 2019, the London Perioperative Medicine Congress. It's on July the 2nd, and it's one of many meetings that EBPOM organises around the world in order to communicate the perioperative medicine message. Have a look, ebpom.org/meetings.